Hey everyone, this is Baylor. My eyes got big because I do that kind of thing. In this video, we're going to look at building a Bootstrap 4 template for like a social media type application. If you want to know more about that, I'll link to it here in the video card that you see. And if you have any suggestions on like what we can do with this, I'm more than excited to have those comments down below. So leave them down below because I appreciate it. So this is the home page. As you can see, we got this big header kind of for a web app type thing. It's lacking something. If you know what it needs, let me know because I feel like there needs to be something down here. But we're going to do this on the home page where it's like a garage type application. So you can see like how many cars are in the system, how many miles are tracked, how many fill-ups. We can browse cars, and I've kind of got this at a kind of a simple state just so we can see like the manufacturers listed here and the models, and we have options to sort. We can see the cars, and you can see when you hover over all of this that you can click this button to view the car. You have some icons to go to like comments and stories and view the gallery for this car. We have an activity feed so we can see who's doing what that's related to your content, whether you're following them or they're following you or whatever. And then we also have the profile page where we have kind of like a jumbotron to say this garage is empty, and or if we have content, then we show it below. But we're going to do both of these since it's kind of like a mock-up. And then on the left, we get some user information and like who's following and friends like that. So let's get started. Let's actually do this home page. So we'll hop into our editor and we'll open up this index.html. So as you can see on our index.html that we have just a bare bones HTML template. And if we look at it in our browser, you can see blank page, can't really see anything. And so the first thing that we want to do is add our nav bar. And so the way we'll do this is we'll use the Bootstrap where we're adding a nav tag. And this is the Bootstrap 4 awesome sauce where we're using functional CSS here to define that we have like nav bar, that the nav bar will expand the full width on a large screen. We want a dark background color, so we're telling it to be light on the links and dark on the background, and then we are adding some margin to the bottom to push the content below. And so if we save this, you can see just barely this little dark bar that's below my Chrome. And not the Chrome browser, but the Chrome on the Chrome. And now with this, what we want to do is add kind of a container. And so what this container is going to do is pull the content so that it fills in. If we inspect this, we'll see that this container has if you look up here, you'll see that we have that width of 1140. And so that's just Bootstrap telling us to have a max width. And so inside of here, we'll add our brand, and we can see that. We pull, and so you can see where this container is making it so it doesn't go all the way to the width, the full width. We have our garage brand. We're going to add the collapsible. So what this is, you can pull this from the Bootstrap docs. That's kind of what I did. It's a lot of code here that we're not going to go into too much. But basically, if we look at it, what we're doing is we're adding a button that is going to be hidden on a large screen, and then whenever the screen shrinks, then we show a button that has the hamburger icon. It's got the 3 lines on it, and that will coincide with this div for this collapse part. And so if we look at it, we actually don't see any changes, but that's okay, because what we're about to do is add 2 nav bar like sections for links. And because we're using Flex, what's going to happen here is this MR auto stands for margin right auto. And what it's going to do is it's going to make so that this one will grow the full width, and the second one is going to get pushed off to the very far this side, like a little bit. And so we'll kind of see that. We'll add in a nav item. It's going to have a nav link that goes to our browse cars. We'll do the same thing with a nav item and nav link to our latest activity. And we'll do it again for another link for track mileage. And you'll notice I've added this area disabled here. And we do that plus the text muted class because if we're not logged in, we still want to kind of advertise that feature, but we also kind of want to hide it at the same time by not making it as bright. And so that's going to go into our first navigation, and as you can see, we have our browse cars, our latest activity, and then that track mileage that we would implement in the future so that we kind of go to a sign up or login page. And then we'll go into the second nav bar on the right, and we're going to add a link to our profile. And so if we refresh, you can see what I've done is I've actually given this an image. And so the way I did that is I just used this image tag. I'm using this Webpack Starter Basic Kit, and so if you look in here, it'll tell you how to use an image, and it tells you to use this special Webpack plugin thing, and it gives you this method for linking to an image on disk. And so that's what all this fancy code is doing in here. But basically the key thing is we're telling it to have a width of 20 pixels. We want it to be a circle. And so that makes it where it fits about the same height as the text, and it gives it this circle to kind of give it this user profile type feel. And then we'll do the same thing here. We're going to add another link, and this will be for our logout. And now you can see we have this logout on the far right, we have our garage on the far left, and because of that margin right auto, it creates this gap. So on the home page, remember we had that banner across the top. And so we'll do that by introducing a new container. And this container here is outside of our nav. And so that means if we take a look in our body, you see we have this new container. It sits below the nav, and we add this MB-5, and that's telling us to have a margin bottom. That 5 is the largest in the Bootstrap utility classes for margins. You have -1, -2, -3, -5, 4, 5, something like. And then you have you can do N here to do negative margins. But what we want to do is we want to add this home banner div. And this is something that I've kind of written that's custom. And we can see that in our style sheets. See, the home banner has a height of 400 pixels, has a background image with the Mercedes, and we tell the background size to cover. And so what that does is it makes it stretch until it fills all the corners here. And then we put it in the center that's with about a 40% offset so that it sits nicely between this 400 pixel tall div. And the next thing we'll do is we'll add our section for our stats. And we've got a bunch of CSS classes going here so that we tell it to be row because we're going to have these as columns. We want no margin on the x-axis, which is like left and right. We want the text to be white, and we do that because we're going to make the background dark. And then we add some rounded bottom, and that goes with the rounded top on our banner. And we add some padding. We are going to align the content to the end. That's actually not needed anymore. We're going to add some margin bottom. That's not needed anymore either. The next thing that we want to do is add our column. And so this is we're going to do is have our stats go here. And so our first column, because we're doing 3, we want to, Bootstrap has a 4-grid. Bootstrap has a 12-grid column, and so what we want to do is have these divided, and if we do 4, that'll mean we can have 3 across. And so we'll put in this h2 tag with a class of display4, and that'll make the text really big. And as you can see now, we have this huge tag here. We're going to add in our cars subtitle so that we can have how many cars are on the system. We'll do another one just like it that has our miles tracked, and then we'll do another one to say how many fill-ups has a system tracked. And so that's how this is our home page. And like I said, we really need to add more content down to the bottom, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Mostly because I don't know what to do. But what we're going to do next is we want to go to our activity page. So our activity page is, we're going to go ahead and already have our nav bar on the screen. So what we'll do is we'll come in and we have this container again. That's so that we can have our content line up nicely on the page. And we want to add another container. Probably not the best way to do that, but I'm doing it this way for now, so that we have a max width of 700 pixels so that it won't fill the whole width of this container. And we're using this MX Auto so that we center ourselves on the page. And then we're going to add a heading for our activity, and so we'll kind of see now this is why that 700 pixels, because it creates it so that it's going to just sit in the middle here. We're going to go in and we're going to use the media component inside of Bootstrap. And this is nice because we can come in and add this image. You can see how the image is sitting here, and we're getting a lot of this style because of this rounded with the margin right to the 3. And what this does is media component is you can have like an image with a body on it, and it'll automatically align this so that the body of it is aligned just to the right of the image. And we'll see this because what we're going to do is we're going to put in a paragraph so that we can have a sentence of what our activity is. So we want to have something like, we say like who the user is, like Leo Marvin has commented on, and then what he's commented on. So in this case, this will be like a story called Bringing Home a Gladiator, and we'll say that happened 4 minutes ago. And so you can see this is already starting to look like an activity feed, just adding this paragraph with the avatar of this user. And what we want to do is we want to add that section like I showed earlier so that we can see more information about what the post is and what he said. And so we're going to add a card, and the Bootstrap card component is it's kind of like the panel in Bootstrap 3. And we're going to add a card body on this, and these two together, card has no padding. Card has the background and the border. Card body pulls the content in, and we'll see that more in a second. But this is a good one to see because when we put this content inside of here, and we'll just use another media component so that we can put our image of the story here, because he's bringing home a gladiator, that's the story. And we put in our body again, so we have the image, or in your case it's the image, and then the content. And inside of here, we'll just put in the comment. And I tried to write this kind of like in the Leo Marvin dialogue that happens with Bill Murray in his first visit at the doctor's office. If you know Leo Marvin from the movie What About Bob, you might kind of see where I was kind of going with this. But with all of that done, as you can see, we have our activity feed where we're telling us what Leo Marvin has done, and we can actually see what the object is and the comment that he made. And so we want to do that again. We'll come down after our card here, and I'm going to add a horizontal rule. And so that brings out this rule here, and we can see in this case Dr. Marvin has starred the car Lexi, and we can see what he said about that, or this description of this car. We'll do this again a couple more times, and now you can see that we have what's looking like a real activity feed. And it's not perfect. Like these images feel a little bit too big, padding feels a little bit big, and we can make these changes. So like if we go to that card body here, we can tell the padding to be smaller. And so as you can see, that pulls it a little bit tighter so that maybe that looks a little bit more like what you would expect to see. Something I think I would add if I were going to, and like this is good for you to try, is pull this text in so it doesn't go the full width and put some type of information here. So like maybe like I don't know what to do on a comment, but maybe like how many replies this comment has gotten, or if the comment's been starred or liked by the users, or when he stars a car, maybe put information about the car, like how many miles have been tracked, how many stories have been told about this car, things like that. I think that'd be a nice addition without cluttering it too much, if you divide this enough, so that you can know about know more about this comment, know more about this car, know more about this user, things like that. The next screen we'll look at is the browse cars. So on the browse cars screen, we're going to start inside of our container, and we're going to add a display flex, and this is going to be kind of like the header of the screen. And so we'll put in our browse cars, and so you can see this here. And then we're going to add a select list, so that sits over here. And we want to put in some options for our sorting. And so when you're browsing cars, one of the things you probably want to do is see things like, I want to see based on the miles driven, or I want to see based on the miles per gallon. And so if we look at this, you can see we have our browse cars with our drop down. And the way we get this layout is because we added that display flex with this justify content in between. And so this is telling it to push the content and maximize that space. So there's no space on the edges, only in between the two items. And if we put a third item, you'll see it justifies this item in the center. Flexbox is very cool, and it gives us this ability to do this kind of stuff. And the next thing we want to do is we're going to use a row. And the rows are for our columns, and that's because this is going to be a 2-column layout where on the sidebar we have our filters for like car manufacturers, car models, and then on the right we have cards for as we're filtering down we get to see what they are. And so we'll come in and we'll add our first layout, our first column on the left, which is a width of 3 columns. And we're going to place this inside of a card, and we pretty much always use card body when we use card. And we're going to title this as filter, so if I save, we're doing this for the screen reader only. And so this is going to say that like if the screen reader is going through the page, it's going to come across this and it's going to say we're in the filter section. And then we're going to add a small title here for what we're filtering at, like this is going to be for manufacturers. And so we're going to add a list, unordered list here, and we'll fill this in so that we get our what we're filtering on. And I forgot to put a link on this, so these links don't work right. And the way I'd like this to work is I'd like it to be a checkbox, so that if you go through this, go to the browse cars, you can see all these popular manufacturers, and you can click on them to toggle and see all the cars by those manufacturers. And we're going to use this same design for our models. So we put in our models, and we put another navigation here, and we could add more links here, and we could change these around to square checked here with the font awesome, and that would actually give us a checked look. The next thing that we want to do is put in our cards for our vehicles. And so we'll come down here and we're going to fill the rest of that space. So Bootstrap's a 12 grid system. We use 3 for the first one. We'll use 9 for the second column. And we're going to put in, and this is the cool part of Bootstrap 4. This is going to use CSS grids, and it does this with a 3 grid layout. And what happens is it creates like a Pinterest grid system, so that all the cards, even though they may have different heights, they'll fill that space and have equal spacing below and on the sides. And so we use that grid columns, and now we just place our card inside of here. And here we're doing something fancy. We are adding this card image top to an image. And we're not putting this inside of card body, we're putting it directly inside of our card. And as you can see, I've also told it to have a height of 150, and I've given this object fit of cover. And so what's going to happen here is this image, if you can kind of tell, it doesn't fit inside of here perfectly. But by using this cover, it stretches it to fill it out, to fill to this whole height here, and it makes it feel nice. And we do this because this is potentially user-uploaded content, and we can't guarantee the image aspect ratio or sizes are all going to be the same. And so by stretching it to cover this whole space, it gives it a nice look. And the next thing we'll do is we'll go in and add our card body. And I'm minimizing the amount of padding here so it's a little bit tighter. And I'm adding this position relative, and you'll see why I do that in a second. But the first thing we want to do is kind of put in the title of this card. So like it's the name of this vehicle. We'll put in what the model is of the vehicle so we can see that. We'll go in and we'll add a description of the video. So this is, about it. We're making the text smaller here so that it fits nicely because we're going to have a lot of content here. We don't want it to be overwhelming. And then we'll go in, and this is where it's going to be fancy. We're going to put in another one of these stat type layouts so that we can say like here how many miles have been driven on this car, and we'll do another one for our MPG. And so these are just small and strong tags that kind of fill this space. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll put in a button for our viewer car. And if we look at this, you can see this button's down here, but you can't click on anything else. And the way we get around that is we're going to add the stretched link to this class. We're going to add the stretched link class to this button. And you can see what happens when I hover over this whole section now, it's clickable. And if we inspect why it does that, Bootstrap is adding an after pseudo selector that has a position of absolute and it fills its container. And so that's why we add the position relative to the card body, so that it restricts how much, like when we say absolute and we say go to the top and the left and the right everywhere, it's going to be constrained to the parent element that has position relative. And so we put that on the card body so that it doesn't try to go beyond this section right here. And the reason for that is because across the bottom here, I want to put in these icons so that we can go to images and like the idea of this is that you can go to like the images and the stories and the comments, and so that it's kind of a lot going on in this card, but it also gives you a way to navigate to what you want to see quickly. That I can click here and view the car, I can click here and I can see the images, or I can click here and see the stories about this car, or I can click here and I can see the comments about the car. And we're going to do this again 2 more times, and that gives us this where we can kind of see how this looks. And I'll show you that grid columns here, so that if we grab these cards, and I'll try to do this like so. You can see, you can't see, well, you can see here, these cards, even though these two are the same height and this one's not, they're shifting just like Pinterest does. It's hard to tell because I didn't pick very good samples here, but that card columns, this CSS class, that will actually make all that work. And that's kind of a fun fact. Like if you hover over that card columns, so the last page that we'll look at is our profile. And so we'll start by going into our container, and we're going to add a row because this is going to be another 2 grid layout. And I've gone ahead and I've put in our 3 width column. We're going to put in a card, and we're going to add the card body with text center. And that's just so that, because we're going to put in the image and like the name, and we want this to fill the space and sit nicely in the center. And then we'll put in an about section so the user can kind of put in a small bio, and then add in some links so that you can navigate to other areas this person exists on the internet. And then below this, I like the idea of kind of adding a friends section. So we'll put this inside of a row, and we're going to put this negative margin. I kind of talked about that, where we can say mx-n1, and what that's saying is margin on the x-axis, left and right, will have a -1 margin with the content aligned to the center. And so the way I'm going to put in a kind of a friend is by putting in this column for this link. We're going to minimize the horizontal padding on this so these will sit tighter, and we're doing that because every one of these is just an image. And so if I populate several of these, you can see how we get our friends that are linked to this user. And the next thing that we want to do is come down. We're going to go into our second column, and now this time when we're using the grid layout in Bootstrap, we're not specifying the width. So the first one was a column of 3. This one with the class of just call will fill that remaining space. And so we're doing that because it makes it a little bit easier if we want to start resizing and things. We don't have to specify all those class widths. And we're going to put in a Jumbotron. Jumbotron, as you probably know, is going to be deprecated, or it already is. It's been removed from the source code of Bootstrap 5. But I like them, and just because of the fact that they're going away, I think it's more important that we have them here. And if we look at this, I've found this pattern, or I kind of made it, but we put this pattern with the Font Awesome icon so that we have some car themes and some other things like ideas, because I need ideas in the comment section. Because I'm moving kind of fast. If I'm glossing over something that you want to see in more detail, I can absolutely do that. But what we're going to do is put in a title here so that we can say like this garage is empty, and we'll kind of throw a reference back. When did the Gone in 60 Seconds movie come out? Is that in the 2000s? 2001, 2002? I don't know. Sometime, but we're throwing back an old movie reference here because the garage is empty. And we'll add a section, and this would be like if we're logged in, this is my account, that I want to be able to kind of have like a shortcut saying, hey, I want to put a car in my garage. So this whole thing is kind of like this, where if we go to a profile and the garage is empty, that we can kind of have a heads up. And then what we'll do is we're just going to add the cars that this user does have in their garage below. And for this, I'm just using the same layout that we used before on our Browse Cars page. So I just took these 3 cars and I just placed them over here. And so that is it. I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.